You know, I almost didn't make this video today. My joints were aching something fierce. The weather forecast mentioned a slight chance of rain, and frankly, I had a dozen excuses ready at the tip of my tongue. But then I laced up these old walking shoes anyway, the same ones my late wife Martha bought me 5 years ago, when I could barely make it to the mailbox without gasping for air. "William," she said with that knowing look in her eyes, "these aren't just shoes, they're your ticket to a second chance at living." She was right, as she often was about most things in our 53 years together. That woman could see round corners, I swear. I still remember that first real walk after my doctor gave me the news. That changed everything. "Your heart is giving up, William," he said, looking at me over those half-moon glasses with a mixture of clinical detachment and genuine concern. And frankly, "So are you." The words hit me like a physical blow. I was 67 then, 30 pounds heavier than I should have been, with medication bottles multiplying in my bathroom cabinet like rabbits. That night, I sat alone in our backyard, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors I barely noticed anymore, wondering how many more I had left to see. The darkness that settled around me matched the heaviness in my chest. The next morning, I put on those shoes Martha bought, just to humor her. I told myself. I made it to the end of our street before my chest tightened and my breath came in short gasps. That frightened me. Barely a quarter mile. I was embarrassed, angry, and most of all, scared down to my bones. Is this all that's left? I thought, leaning against a neighbor's fence, a slow, undignified fade to black. The thought of becoming a burden to my children, to Jennifer with her busy career and Tyler with his young family, it was almost too much to bear. That was nearly 15 years ago, though sometimes it feels like yesterday. Yesterday, I walked for miles along the river path near my home in Connecticut, stopping only once to watch a blue heron fishing in the shallows. Not bad for someone who's seen 82 birthdays come and go. The same doctor who once prepared me for the worst now shakes his head in bewilderment during my checkups and says, "Whatever you're doing, William, keep doing it." And what I'm doing is simple. I walk. Every single day, rain or shine, happy or sad, good knee day or bad knee day. I put one foot in front of the other and move forward into the world. When my grandson Tyler asked what changed, what made the difference between the grandfather who couldn't climb the porch steps without wheezing and the one who now takes his kids hiking on weekends, I realized there wasn't just one answer I could give him. There were 5 profound lessons walking has taught me, 5 unexpected gifts this simple act has given me in my twilight years, and I promised him I'd share them with others who might be sitting where I once sat, wondering if their best days are behind them, if it's too late to reclaim some measure of strength and purpose. So here they are, the 5 reasons I believe everyone over 60 should start walking every single day. Not next Monday, not when the weather improves, not after the holidays or when your new shoes arrive or when your knee feels better. Today, this very day, whatever shape you're in, whatever fears you carry. The first reason hit me about 3 months into my daily walks. I was halfway up Fletcher Hill, a modest incline that had once seemed like Mount Everest to me. But this time, something was different. I wasn't gasping for air like a drowning man. My heart wasn't pounding against my ribs like it wanted to escape. I actually felt good, strong, even in a way I'd forgotten was possible. I stopped at the top and just stood there, hands on my hips, looking out over the neighborhood where I'd lived for decades, seeing it from a vantage point I hadn't enjoyed in years. The sprawling oak trees, the church steeple in the distance, the river winding its way through it all. The view hadn't changed, but I had. Well, I'll be damned, I whispered to myself, not a soul around to hear. That's when the first truth sank in. Walking had returned my body to me. Not the body of my youth, that ship had sailed long ago, but a body that worked, a body that could carry me where I wanted to go without betrayal, a body I could rely on again, at least in modest ways. My doctor confirmed what I was feeling. At my next checkup, my blood pressure had dropped 15 points. My resting heart rate was lower than it had been in 20 years. My diabetic symptoms were retreating. The pain in my knees that had been my constant companion, still there, but muted, manageable. No longer the first thing I noticed when I opened my eyes each morning. For years, I'd thought of my body as the enemy, this failing machinery that was betraying me piece by piece, system by system. Each new diagnosis, each new limitation, was another surrender in a war one was destined to lose. But walking taught me that this relationship could be renegotiated on better terms. My body wasn't the enemy. It was just waiting for me to start listening again, to start caring for it properly, to remember we're on the same team after all these years. I remember a particular moment about 6 months into my walking practice. I was at the supermarket, reaching automatically for a box of cream-filled cookies, my usual reward for making it through another day. But something stopped my hand mid-air. Not willpower, which I've never had much of, not guilt, which I've had plenty of but rarely listened to, but a strange new respect for this vessel that carried my soul through the world. You've worked too hard today, I thought, looking down at my legs that had carried me 2 miles that morning. To sabotage yourself now. I left the cookies on the shelf and bought fresh berries instead. It wasn't deprivation. It wasn't punishment. It was partnership. This brings me to the second reason walking changed everything, which surprised me even more than the physical benefits. One rainy Tuesday in April, I forced myself out despite the weather. I had made a promise to myself. Every day means every day, and I intended to keep it. The usual neighbors weren't on their porches that morning. The dog walkers had stayed home. The streets were empty, glistening with rain. It was just me and the rhythmic splashing of my feet through puddles. A sound that became a kind of music after a while. And then, something extraordinary happened. The constant chatter in my head, the worries about money, about my children's lives, about the political situation, about the strange pain in my left shoulder, it all quieted down. For what felt like the first time in decades, my mind cleared. Like a sky after a storm. I could hear birds singing between raindrops. I noticed how the wet bark of the old oak trees darkened to reveal their true patterns. I felt the cool air filling my lungs completely, reaching parts that seemed to have been closed off for years. Without planning it, without even knowing what to call it, I had stumbled into meditation. Walking had become my gateway to mental clarity. You see, at our age, the mind can become a prison of its own making. We ruminate on regrets. We worry about becoming burdens. We mourn what we've lost and fear what's coming for us just around the corner. It's exhausting, this constant mental noise. But when you walk, really walk, with presence, the simple rhythm of your footfalls becomes a reset button for your thoughts. I started noticing this mental clarity extending into the rest of my day. I could focus on my woodworking projects again without getting frustrated and abandoning them half-finished. Conversations with my daughter Jennifer became deeper, less distracted by the constant ping-pong of unrelated worries. I even started reading books again, actual books with complex ideas, not just skimming headlines that raised my blood pressure and darkened my mood for hours afterward. There was this one afternoon, about a year into my walking practice, when I realized I hadn't thought about dying all day, not once. For someone who had been rehearsing their final moments daily, imagining the collapse, the hospital, the tubes, the whispered goodbyes, this was nothing short of miraculous. Walking hadn't just changed my body, it had liberated my mind from its own worst tendencies. The third reason came to me through an unexpected encounter that blossomed into something beautiful. I had extended my route to include the local park, and I kept seeing the same gentleman there, probably in his mid-70s, always sitting on the same bench by the duck pond. After several days of nodding hello as I passed, we finally introduced ourselves properly. His name was Robert, and he had lost his wife to cancer the previous year. 47 years they'd been married. For weeks, I was in pain, angry at my body's fragility, convinced this was the beginning of the end. The first domino in a cascade of injuries that would confine me to a recliner. My doctor suggested I take a break from walking until the wrist healed completely to avoid another fall. 2 days of sitting at home, watching daytime television and feeling sorry for myself, and I knew this wasn't right. The darkness was creeping back in around the edges of my mind. The next morning, I asked my daughter Jessica to wrap my arm securely, and I went for a slow, careful walk just around the block. Just being in motion again lifted my spirits in a way I can't quite explain. By the time my wrist healed, I had adjusted my walking style to protect it and was back to my regular routes, albeit with new ice grippers on my boots. No more excuses. This taught me perhaps the most important lesson of all. Resilience isn't about avoiding falls. It's about getting back up, about adapting rather than surrendering. At our age, setbacks are inevitable. Bodies break more easily and heal more slowly. The question isn't if they'll come, but how we'll respond when they do. Will we use them as the final evidence that it's time to give up, or will we see them as opportunities to problem solve, to demonstrate to ourselves that we still have agency? You might be wondering if walking alone is enough. Don't I need more? Intensive exercise, weights, special equipment, a personal trainer. In my experience, walking is the foundation upon which all other healthy choices can be built. It's the gateway practice. Once I became a walker, other positive changes followed. Naturally, almost effortlessly, I became more conscious of my nutrition because I could feel how different foods affected my energy on walks. I started doing simple strength exercises at home because I wanted to tackle more challenging routes. I prioritized sleep because I noticed how much it affected my walking stamina the next day. But it all began with walking, the most human, most accessible form of movement available to us. Our bodies are designed for this simple, profound act. We've been doing it since our species first stood upright. It requires no special skill, no expensive equipment, no membership fees, just the willingness to open your door and step outside, just the decision to begin. Now, I look at my friends who didn't make this choice. Good people, many of them. People I've known for decades, shared meals with, watched children grow up alongside mine. But at 82, the difference in our quality of life is stark and sometimes difficult to witness. Too many are shuttling between doctor appointments, dependent on others for basic needs. Their worlds shrinking daily to the dimensions of their living rooms. When we meet for the occasional coffee, our conversations often revolve around ailments and medications, obituaries and regrets. I listen with compassion, but inside I'm thinking, it didn't have to be this way. Not entirely, at least. We can't avoid aging, but we can meet it on better terms. We can negotiate with it. We can maintain our dignity and our independence longer than we've been led to believe. The science supports this. Study after study has shown that regular walking reduces the risk of every chronic disease that plagues our age group. But more than statistics, I have the living proof of my own experience and that of my walking companions who range in age, from 68 to 84. If there's one message I want to leave with you today, it's this: it's not too late. I was 67, overweight, depressed, and convinced my best days were behind me when I took that first walk around the block. I was wrong. So very wrong. The past 15 years have been among the richest of my life, not despite my age, but in some ways because of it. I have the time now to notice, to appreciate, to be fully present in a way that wasn't possible in the hurried decades of career building and child raising. I have the wisdom to value simple pleasures that once seemed insignificant. Walking gave me back my body, cleared my mind of its darkest ruminations, connected me to a community of kindred spirits, reconciled me to the seasons of life, and reawakened my capacity for joy. These 5 gifts are available to anyone willing to put one foot in front of the other, day after day, with intention and presence. They're waiting for you, just outside your door. I'm not promising it will be easy. I'm not saying it will cure everything that ails you. There are no miracles here, no drastic transformations, just small, incremental improvements that compound over time into a life reclaimed. But I am telling you from the perspective of someone who has witnessed nearly a century of human experience, that it can transform your relationship with aging in ways both subtle and profound. Yesterday, as I walked along the river, I passed a woman sitting alone on a bench. She looked to be in her 60s, gazing at the water with that distant expression I recognize all too well. The look of someone tallying losses, feeling time slip away. I almost stopped to tell her everything I've just told you. I wanted to say, it's not too late to begin again. The path is right here, waiting for you. I didn't interrupt her thoughts. Some journeys we must initiate ourselves, but I'm hoping that somehow these words find their way to her, and to anyone else who needs to hear them. Your body is waiting for you to reclaim it. The world still has beauty to reveal to you. There are connections yet to be made, joys yet to be discovered, strength yet to be found. All it takes is opening your door and taking that first step. Then another, then another. The path unfolds from there, I promise you. And though I can't walk it for you, please know that in spirit, I'm right there beside you, matching you step for step, cheering you on in this beautiful, challenging journey we call life after 60. So what do you say? Will you meet me out there on the path tomorrow? The weather forecast is calling for light showers, but between you and me, those make for the best walking days of all. The world looks different in the rain, cleaner, more honest somehow, the colors more vibrant, the air sweeter. Besides, as my walking friend Eleanor always says with a laugh as she pulls on her rain jacket, we're not sugar, we won't melt. One last thing before I go, whatever you do, don't wait until you feel ready. You won't. The perfect moment doesn't exist. Don't wait until it's convenient. It never will be. Don't wait for permission or validation or the perfect conditions, or until you've lost 10 pounds first, or until your schedule clears up, or until the pain completely subsides. Those are all just forms of resistance, and resistance will always find new expressions. Just begin. The simple act of starting changes everything. I'm living proof of that, and though we've never met face to face, I believe in your capacity to change your story. Just as I changed mine, I believe in your resilience, your adaptability, your innate wisdom. I believe that somewhere inside you, beneath the aches and worries, beneath the resignation that may have settled over you like a heavy blanket, there's a spark still waiting to be fanned into flame. Remember, one step at a time. That's how every great journey begins, especially the journey back to yourself. These walks keep me tethered to the world, he told me one morning, tossing a piece of bread to an eager mallard who seemed to recognize him. Some days, they're the only reason I get out of bed at all. I knew exactly what he meant. Robert and I became walking companions every Tuesday and Thursday, our conversations flowing as steadily as our steps. Soon, we were joined by Eleanor, a retired school teacher with a wicked sense of humor and a collection of sun hats for every occasion, and then by Frank, a Vietnam veteran who walked with a slight limp and brought his harmonica, playing it at the halfway point of our route while we caught our breath. Before I knew it, I had a community again. Not the community of my working years, built around career and obligation, but something chosen, and therefore more precious, on days when my motivation flagged, when my bed seemed too comfortable to leave, knowing they were waiting for me at our meeting spot was enough to get me moving. We celebrated birthdays with thermos coffee and Eleanor's famous oatmeal cookies. We took detours to admire particularly beautiful gardens or interesting architecture. We debated politics, shared recipes, and eventually, our deeper fears and hopes. I'd spent nearly 7 decades believing that friendship was something that happened to you when you were young, in school or early work environments, and then you just maintained those connections until they were severed by death or distance. How wrong I was. Walking had given me the gift of new beginnings, new connections forged in the shared understanding of what it means to age in this world, both its challenges and unexpected joys. When Martha passed away 3 winters ago, it was Robert, Eleanor, and Frank who showed up at my door with food, with patience, with the quiet understanding that grief needs witnesses. They got me walking again, when all I wanted was to sink into my empty house and disappear. One foot in front of the other, Frank would say, gently but firmly, just like always. And they were right. The rhythm of walking became the rhythm that carried me through grief, not past it, but through it. The 4th reason walking changed everything came to me gradually, through the simple act of witnessing the turning of the seasons. When you walk the same routes day after day, week after week, you begin to notice the subtle shifts in the world around you, the first tentative buds of spring, so easy to miss if you're rushing by in a car, the deepening greens of summer, richer and more varied than I'd remembered, the explosive, almost desperate colors of fall, the stark, revealing bones of winter landscapes that hide nothing. I had spent decades rushing from climate-controlled house to climate-controlled office to climate-controlled shopping centers. The natural world had become backdrop, scenery glimpsed through windows, something to be protected from rather than immersed in. Walking put me back into the flow of life, into its natural rhythms and cycles, from which I'd been isolated for too long. There was a particular maple tree along my route that became a kind of calendar for me. I watched it transform through the seasons, and in doing so, I made peace with the seasons of my own life. There is beauty in the spring, yes, but there is also beauty in the fall, perhaps even more poignant for its transience, its acknowledgement of what's coming. The tree taught me that, at 82, I am in the autumn of my life. Once, that thought filled me with dread, with a frantic desire to turn back the calendar. Now, it fills me with a quiet appreciation for the unique beauty of this season. The maple doesn't rage against the coming of winter. It doesn't cling desperately to its leaves as they change color. It simply expresses the full glory of its current season, then gracefully prepares for the next. I'm trying to learn from its example. Walking through rain, snow, heat, and perfect blue sky days taught me resilience of a different sort, not the grim, white-knuckled endurance of my younger years when I'd push through anything to prove my worth, but a supple, adaptive strength. I learned to dress appropriately, to adjust my pace, to find joy in the challenge of a windy day or the gift of an unexpected warm afternoon in November. I learned that comfort isn't always the highest value, sometimes being uncomfortable. Being fully exposed to the elements reminds you most vividly that you're alive. This brings me to the fifth and perhaps most profound reason I believe walking saved my life. About 2 years into my daily practice, I was crossing the old bridge over Willow Creek, a route I'd taken hundreds of times by then, when I stopped to watch a young family below. A mother and father were teaching their little girl, maybe 4 years old, to skip stones across the water. Her delight when she finally got one to bounce twice was infectious. I found myself smiling, even laughing along with them, even with no one around to see me. That's when it hit me. I was experiencing joy again. Not the manufactured happiness of consumption or entertainment, but simple, spontaneous joy at being alive in this moment, witnessing the continuity of life around me. Walking had awakened my capacity for wonder, which I had thought was buried. With my youth, when you're young, joy seems like your birthright. It finds you without effort, bubbling up from unexpected sources. As you age, especially past retirement, it's easy to believe that the best moments are behind you. That joy becomes a diminishing resource. Walking taught me that joy doesn't diminish with age. It just requires more intention, more presence, more willingness to notice and appreciate what's always been there. I remember one particular dawn walk in early spring. I'd started going out earlier, watching the world wake up. The mist was rising from the fields outside town, and the first rays of sunlight were turning everything golden and otherworldly. A fox crossed my path, paused to look at me with intelligent, assessing eyes, then continued on its way into the underbrush. Nothing extraordinary by some standards, no mountain vistas or ocean sunsets, but in that moment, I felt a connection to something ancient and ongoing, something much bigger than my individual worries and pains. Pay attention, the world seemed to be saying, I still have gifts for you. If only you'll notice them. I started bringing a small notebook on my walks, jotting down moments of beauty or insight that I didn't want to forget. Reading through it now is like having a map of my reawakening. To fawns at the edge of Wilson's property, so still I almost miss them. Perfect spider web covered in dew, a natural masterpiece. Shared my apple with a brazen squirrel today. He took it right from my fingers. Sunset like the world was being reborn in fire. These aren't grand adventures or achievements by conventional standards. They won't make headlines or history books, but they've made my life, my actual lived experience of being here on this earth, immeasurably richer. And isn't that what we're really after? Now, I want to be honest with you about something important. Starting wasn't easy, not at all. Those first few weeks, every excuse in the book paraded through my mind each morning as the alarm went off. It's too cold. My knee hurts. I'm tired. I'll start tomorrow when I'm better rested. I deserve a day off. Walking isn't really exercise anyway. I'm too old to make a difference now. The voice of surrender is clever, persistent, and knows exactly which buttons to push to keep you in your comfort zone. It took real discipline to ignore it day after day until the habit was established. If you're sitting there thinking, it's too late for me, or I'm too far gone, or my situation is different, I understand completely. I felt the same way. Those thoughts aren't the truth. They're just thoughts, and you don't have to believe everything you think. Here's what helped me. I made a promise to myself that I would walk for just 10 minutes. That's all. 10 minutes. Anyone can do anything for 10 minutes, no matter how out of shape or discouraged. Some days, that's all I could manage, but most days, once I was out there, 10 minutes became 20, then 30, then an hour. The hardest part is always putting on the shoes and closing the front door behind you. I also promised myself that I would never use failure as an excuse to quit entirely. If I missed a day because I was sick or because life intervened, I wouldn't berate myself or decide the whole endeavor was pointless. I would simply begin again the next day. This perspective of gentle persistence rather than all-or-nothing thinking made all the difference. There was a significant setback in my 4th year of walking. I slipped on some ice during a winter walk and fractured my wrist quite badly.